evening, everyone. Welcome to another session on nutrition. Today we are going to talk about complementary feeding. And maybe we need to know, first of all, what is complementary feeding. Complementary feeding is the addition of other foods or the introduction of other foods while the baby continues to breastfeed. We call it complementary feeding and not weaning, because complementary means the mother continues to breastfeed, but the food that she's going to introduce the baby to will just be complementing the breast milk. On the other hand, weaning is to taper off breastfeeding. When you wean a child, it means you are intending to stop the child from breastfeeding. So you start giving other foods and you start reducing breastfeeding. So many mothers out there, especially the first-time mothers, are asking, how do we start complementary feeding? We need to know what is the frequency of feeding, what is the type of food to give, and what are the quantities. Now, when you're starting complementary feeding, you have to be very careful as to which foods to start with, because when you mix too many foods together, you'll not be able to tell if a child is allergic to any of those ingredients that you're using. So generally what we start with is porridge, and this porridge, we need to make it thick to an extent that when you want to pour it out, maybe from a spoon, it doesn't flow, but rather it drops, or it drops, you can see that it's heavy. But when it's thin, when you try to pour it out, it will flow, meaning that it has more water than the nutrients that the baby needs. So the next question that many mothers are going to ask, how is the flour supposed to be made? There are so many concoctions out there in the market. What I mean by concoction is that there are so many flours which have too many ingredients for a young baby, and it's important that we know what the flour should contain. First and foremost, when you're introducing a child to new food, you need to start with one food at a go, as I had mentioned before. Now, when it is flour, you can either start with maize flour, then you can graduate to maize and a little millet in it. Then slowly, you can change maybe maize and sorghum, maybe sorghum and cassava, maybe millet and cassava, maybe rice flour. So when you're making this porridge, do not add any other ingredients. Now, when you go to the market, you're going to find there are so many millers, flour millers. They mix so many things, groundnuts, green grams, omena, beans, soya. All those things are not necessary for the baby at this stage. And soya is not recommended for infants who are less than 2 years old. And milk, you'll find some flours, they have indicated on the packet that it has dry skimmed milk. Now, cow's milk is not recommended for a child who is below 1 year. So maybe the earliest you can start giving cow's milk is at 9 months. So the porridge should just be plain porridge, and then you continue breastfeeding. Some mothers ask, now if we are not going to add milk to the porridge, how is the child going to survive? The child is surviving on your breast milk. Your breast milk continues to supply most of the nutrients that the baby needs. The only difference is that the quantities are now minimal, meaning that the quantities that the child is getting is not enough to meet their growing needs. When we look at nutrients like energy, we look at vitamin A, we look at iron. They keep on diminishing as the child grows older. And this is why we need to introduce other foods. As the child is growing, they play more, they use more energy, so they'll need more energy in their foods. Now, we are talking about introducing the uji first. So this porridge, how much of it should we give to the baby? Some mothers will come and complain that now that I've started introducing my baby to porridge, they are not taking, they're refusing. Ideally, when you are introducing a child to food for the first time, that porridge you just need to give about 2 tablespoons to 3 tablespoons. And what is the frequency? You give it twice a day. The rest of the day, continue breastfeeding the child. Now, these 2 to 3 tablespoons, it will depend on the appetite of the baby. As the baby continues getting used to the porridge, you'll find that they demand for more. So you keep on increasing gradually so that by the time the child is reaching 7 months, they are able to take at least half a cup. Which cup are we talking about? We are talking about the small cup, which measures 250 milliliters. Or for those who are in the rural areas, we are used to this cup that is used for measuring milk. When you go to most homesteads, you'll find that's the cup they use. So that's the cup we are talking about. So at 6 to 7 months, by the time the child is 7 months, we expect them to be able to finish at least half of that cup. Now, from 7 to 8 months, we expect this child now to continue taking the half a cup. But remember, the child should continue breastfeeding. Breastfeeding still forms a big part of the child's diet. So what is the frequency? We are still going to give the child 2 times a day. And then in the middle of these 2 snacks, I'll call them snacks, the child will continue breastfeeding. Now, when the child reaches 9 months, at 9 months, we expect this child to be able to finish at least 3/4 of that porridge. And at 9 months, we have now introduced other foods. Actually, the other foods we start introducing at 7 months. At 6 to 7, it is porridge. But at 7 months, now you start cooking other foods like waru, cooked bananas, arrowroots, rice, ugali, all those starchy foods. But if you are going to give rice, we have to be careful because the grains, even an adult, it's very easy to choke on rice. So for the baby, we advise that you can add maybe some waru so that it's easy to mash that food. So you don't just give the baby starches only. I said that when we are starting complementary feeding, we need to look at the quantity, we need to look at the type of food. In short, we are saying we need to look at variety, and then we look at the amounts. So at 6 to 7, I said we are going to give 2 to 3 tablespoons of porridge. At 7 to 8, we are now increasing up to about half a cup. Then at 9 to 11, we are increasing that amount to about 3/4 of a cup. If you have a bowl, because we don't have food in a cup, you can measure the food in the cup, then you convert it to the bowl. So we expect the child at 9 to 11 months to finish at least 3/4 of that bowl. But again, if the child has a good appetite and demands for more, you can add them a little. Then at 12 months to 23 months, 12 months is equivalent to 1 year. So at 12 to 23 months, which is almost 2 years, we expect this baby to be able to take a full cup, that cup of 250 milliliters. We expect the baby to finish 1 full cup or a bowl measuring the same amount. But if the baby wants more, you can add them. Now, which foods are we talking about? Remember, I talked about variety. This baby is growing. They need food to build their bodies. They need food to fight off infections. They need food to give them energy to move about. So the easiest way to ensure that the baby's food is almost balanced is to ensure that it has at least 3 different colors. At least. It can have even 5 different colors, like maybe there is a red or an orange, like in carrots. Then we have greens. You can add dania, you can add spinach. Then we have the starches. We can have either it's waru, cooked bananas, rice, ugali, cassava, arrowroots. And then another thing that I want us to point out, when we are feeding our babies, let us give them the actual food and not the soup. Don't give them bean soup. Don't give them meat soup. Don't give them fish soup. When you're cooking fish, get the fleshy part of the fish, remove the bones, mix that fleshy part with the baby's food. If it is meat, while you're chopping up the meat, make sure there's 1 big chunk that you've left for the baby. So cook the food. When it is well done, get a sharp knife, scrape the big chunk into very small pieces. Or for those who have a mincer, you can mince the meat. Then you mix it with the baby's food. Now, when it comes to beans, when it comes to ndengu, all those foods, you can mash them together with the baby's food and you give them. Don't give them soup. Your child will end up with malnutrition. Then when it comes to fruits, a baby at 8 months onwards can eat a variety of fruits. They can eat pawpaws, they can eat avocados, they can eat pineapples. Okay, pineapples, if they don't have teeth, you can squeeze out the juice for them. You can squeeze out the juice from the orange. You can mash the mangoes. So these fruits, you can give them as a snack. Now, I talked about the variety in the food. When a child reaches about 9 months, you need to feed them at least 3 times in a day, not 2 times as we are feeding the 7 to 8 month old baby. At 9 to 11, they are bigger, their stomach is bigger, they need more food, but they cannot consume too much food at one sitting. So you give them small but more frequently. That is why we are increasing the frequency to 3 meals a day, and you also continue breastfeeding. Then the snacks. Porridge is not a main meal. Porridge is a snack. Milk is a snack. Now, when our baby reaches 9 months, now you can introduce the cow's milk. We are not saying you stop breastfeeding, continue breastfeeding, but now you introduce the cow's milk. So you can give milk in between the meals, you can give porridge in between, you can give the fruits. Then, how do we prepare the baby's food? You don't have to cook a baby's food separately. A baby from 9 months can eat from the family pot. You simply need to remove the baby's portion. Then you mechanically modify by either mashing, by either blending, by either grating, and there we are. The only thing you need to be cautious about, do not put spices in that food. If you want to put spices, remove the baby's portion, then put spices in your food. Do not put too much oil, do not put too much salt. Water. At times you may see when you're drinking water, your baby also wants water. From 6 months onwards, it's okay to give the baby water, because now your milk, the water that it has, is not enough to quench the baby's thirst. So if a baby wants water, just make sure that it is clean, safe water. Give the baby water to drink. For a baby who is not breastfeeding, give them at least 2 cups of milk per day. And for the one who is breastfeeding, even just 1 cup is enough for the day. Yogurt is good for the babies. And when we are talking about the various food groups, we have the vegetables, we have the pulses, we have the grains and cereals, we have the meat, we have the fleshy meats, we have the eggs. And for those who believe that children should not eat eggs, children are allowed to eat eggs. However, you need to watch out. Many children are allergic to animal proteins, so as you introduce the animal proteins, be on the watch out. If you realize your baby is allergic to eggs, stop using it for that time. Usually they outgrow the allergy in about 2 years. If they're allergic to meat, the same thing. Avoid that meat until the time they can be able to tolerate. Now, when you're giving the baby food, make sure that the food is not too hot, that it can burn the baby. But most important, look at the frequency, look at the amount that you're giving, and look at variety in that food. In our next topic, we will look at the various foods that a baby can use. Because people have been asking, can my baby take yogurt? Can my baby take blah, blah, blah? I want to talk about it in my next session. And while you are watching this video, I encourage you to ask as many questions as you want. Please remember to subscribe, to like, to comment, and to share with your friends. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.